It was a bright, dry morning at the U.S. Air Force Base in Nevada. The desert sun was already climbing, turning the runway into a mirror of heat. Inside the briefing room, the air buzzed with chatter, the low hum of pilots talking, teasing, and sipping their morning coffee. It was the start of a new training cycle, which meant fresh faces and new reputations to be made. Captain Ryan Mitchell leaned back in his chair, his flight suit half-zipped, aviator sunglasses hanging from his collar. He was one of those pilots who had seen it all, confident, relaxed, and just a little bit cocky. Around the base, he was known for his sharp flying and sharper humor. He'd earned respect over the years, but he also had a habit of making fun of anything that sounded too serious or dramatic. That morning, the squadron commander walked in with a clipboard and a serious look. The room went quiet immediately. Everyone straightened up as he started reading out names for the new training rotation. Each name came with a call sign, a nickname earned through experience or attitude. Call signs were a big deal in the Air Force. They weren't chosen, they were earned. They told stories about who you were in the sky, your style, your strength, your story. As the list went on, Ryan heard a few familiar names: Falcon, Razor, Blaze. All solid, battle-tested pilots. Then the commander paused for a moment, looked at his paper, and announced, Captain Emma Reyes, call sign Viper 1. Ryan almost snorted into his coffee. Viper 1? He whispered to the guy next to him. What is this, Top Gun 3? His buddy chuckled under his breath. A few others smirked too, trying not to make it obvious. Emma stood up from the back row as her name was called. She was tall, athletic, and calm. Not the kind of person who demanded attention, but the kind that naturally drew it. Her flight suit was perfectly neat, and her expression didn't change even when she caught Ryan's quick grin. She just gave a small nod to the commander, her face unreadable. Ryan wasn't trying to be cruel, he just didn't think much of the nickname. Viper 1 sounded too bold, too cinematic. He assumed she was one of those new pilots who tried too hard to sound tough. He didn't know anything about her yet, but his mind had already made a picture. A rookie who talked big but flew safe. The briefing continued. The commander outlined the week's flight plans, the weather reports, and the new simulation schedule. Ryan tried to focus, but his attention kept drifting back to the woman sitting a few seats away. She was quiet, almost too quiet. No nervous tapping, no forced laughter, no whispering to the others. She just sat there, listening carefully, her eyes sharp and calm. When the meeting ended, the pilots began filing out of the room. Ryan stretched, smirking a little as he said to his friend, Viper 1? Huh? Let's see if she can live up to that. They both laughed softly as they walked out into the blinding desert sunlight. But behind them, Emma walked out alone, carrying her flight helmet under one arm. She didn't seem bothered. In fact, she looked like someone who'd heard that kind of laugh before, and didn't waste time caring. Out on the runway, the roar of jet engines filled the air. The smell of fuel and dust mixed together. Familiar, harsh, and oddly comforting to those who lived for the sky. The base was alive with movement. Mechanics shouting, tires screeching, the metallic clang of tools echoing across the hangars. Emma stopped for a second, watching the jets take off one by one. Her eyes followed them calmly, as if she already knew she'd soon be up there, proving herself not with words, but with flight. Inside the cafeteria later that day, the talk continued. Pilots were joking, sharing old stories, and, of course, gossiping about the newcomers. Did you see her record? One of them asked. She's from the Guard, not academy trained. Ryan shrugged. Figures. Probably good on paper, but the skies are a different game. He didn't mean to sound harsh, but like many veterans, he had that quiet pride, that belief that only experience in real missions truly counted. What Ryan didn't realize, though, was that Emma Reyes already had more than enough of that. She'd flown dangerous rescue operations, navigated through storms that grounded most pilots, and once completed a mission after losing half her instruments midair. Her call sign, Viper 1, wasn't self-given. It was earned on a mission when she outmaneuvered 3 enemy aircraft alone, guiding her damaged jet safely home. That story had reached command level, But most pilots at this base hadn't heard it yet. To them, she was just a quiet newcomer with a dramatic nickname. To her, it didn't matter what they thought. She'd been underestimated before, and every time, she'd let her flying do the talking. That night, as the base lights glowed against the desert horizon, Ryan sat with his friends, still laughing lightly about the new arrivals. He had no idea that in just a few days, the same woman he chuckled at would completely change his view of what real skill looked like. He didn't know that Viper 1 would soon become the name everyone on base spoke with awe, and that he'd be the first one to admit he was wrong. For now, though, it was just the beginning. One small laugh in a room full of pilots. A tiny spark before the fire that was about to unfold in the skies above. Captain Emma Reyes was not like most pilots people expected to see in the Air Force. She didn't have a famous last name or family in the military. She wasn't from one of those well-known academies that produced generations of fighter pilots. She had built her career the hard way, with long hours, sleepless nights, and endless missions that tested her courage again and again. She grew up in a small town, the kind of place where fighter jets were something you only saw in movies. As a kid, she used to watch the sky for hours, tracing every plane with her finger until it disappeared. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a nurse. They didn't have much, but they had a rule. Never quit on what you believe in. Emma carried that with her everywhere. When she joined the National Guard, people didn't take her seriously at first. She was quiet, polite, and didn't show off. But when it came to flying, something changed in her. The calm, soft-spoken girl became focused and fierce once she was in the cockpit. Flying wasn't just her job. It was the one place she felt completely alive. Over the years, she faced her share of doubts and setbacks. Some instructors questioned her toughness. Others said she wasn't aggressive enough for combat flying. She didn't argue back. She just trained harder. When others went home after hours, she stayed back in the simulator. When the weather was too rough for flight practice, she volunteered to test new maneuvers. Slowly, she earned the respect of those who once doubted her. Her call sign, Viper 1, came from a mission overseas, one that no one at her new base knew about. During that mission, her squadron had been ambushed by 3 enemy jets. The situation turned bad quickly. Her radar jammed, her wingman lost communication, and her aircraft took a minor hit. Most pilots would have retreated or called for help. Emma didn't. She stayed calm, used her instincts, and outmaneuvered all 3 enemy aircraft, forcing them to retreat. It was a move that took nerves of steel and flawless skill. When she landed back at base that day, the ground crew started calling her Viper. Fast, sharp, and unpredictable. Later, her commander added the 1 as a sign of respect, saying, "You strike first, and you strike smart." That story spread through her old unit like wildfire. But when she was transferred to Nevada, it didn't follow her. Here, she was just another pilot with a nickname that sounded too bold for her calm personality. And that was fine with her. Emma never needed people to know her story. She preferred to let her flying speak for her. At the new base, the atmosphere was different. The pilots were competitive, loud, and always teasing each other. Emma noticed how they talked, who they respected, who they ignored. She quickly realized that respect here wasn't given. It was earned through reputation or showmanship. She didn't fit into either. She wasn't loud, and she didn't brag about her record. On her first day in the hangar, she quietly checked her aircraft. A sleek F-16 with a gray matte finish and her call sign painted under the cockpit. She ran her hand along the metal surface, feeling the cool touch of the jet she'd soon fly. The sound of laughter echoed behind her. Ryan and a few others were cracking jokes, their voices bouncing off the hangar walls. She didn't turn around. She'd heard those kinds of laughs before. Not cruel, just the kind that came from people who didn't yet know what she could do. Later that day, she sat in the mess hall, quietly eating her lunch while the others chatted in groups. Ryan sat a few tables away, talking about past missions, telling stories that made everyone laugh. He was confident, relaxed, and clearly popular. Emma noticed how people looked at him, the way junior pilots listened when he spoke like his words carried weight. She could tell he'd earned his position, but he also carried that typical fighter pilot ego, the kind that thought nothing could surprise him anymore. When one of the younger pilots asked Emma about her background, she just smiled and said, "National Guard, now F-16 lead." That was all. She didn't mention the missions, the dogfights, or the commendations. She never liked talking about herself. But when the young pilot noticed her call sign patch and said, "Viper 1, that's a cool name," she simply nodded and replied, "It's just a name. Flying makes the name mean something." That night, back in her small quarters, Emma sat on her bed, polishing her helmet. The name Viper 1 gleamed faintly under the light. She thought about her first day, the chuckles, the glances, the quiet assumptions. It wasn't the first time she'd seen that reaction. People often saw her calmness as weakness, her silence as inexperience. But she had learned that proving yourself doesn't start with arguing. It starts with action. Outside, the desert wind howled softly, carrying the distant sound of jets returning from night training. Emma stood by the window and looked out toward the airfield, where faint lights blinked against the darkness. Tomorrow she'd take to the sky with the others. And in that sky, where skill mattered more than words, she would show them exactly why Viper 1 wasn't just a name. It was a warning. She didn't plan to embarrass anyone or make a point. She just wanted to fly the way she always did. Smooth, precise, fearless. But deep down, a quiet thought lingered. The man who chuckled at her call sign would soon learn that the calmest pilots often hide the fiercest storms inside them. For Emma, this wasn't about pride. It was about respect, the kind that isn't demanded, but earned through skill, courage, and silence. And once she stepped into that cockpit, the sky itself would speak for her. 2 days after the new team arrived, the pilots at the Nevada base got their first real challenge, a dogfight training mission. It was the kind of simulation that every pilot looked forward to because it wasn't about paperwork, reports, or orders. It was about flying skill against skill, instinct against instinct. The briefing room was full again that morning, but this time the mood was sharper. Everyone knew today would decide who really belonged in the sky. The commander walked in and started assigning flights. When he announced the teams, the room got quiet for a moment. Captain Ryan Mitchell and Captain Emma Reyes were not on the same team. They were against each other. Both would lead their own groups of pilots in a mock dogfight over the Nevada desert. Ryan grinned. "Well, looks like I'll get to see what the Viper can do," he said lightly, earning a few chuckles from the other pilots. He wasn't trying to be mean, but there was still a small part of him that doubted her. To him, Emma still seemed too calm, too reserved, and he'd seen many rookies like that crack under pressure once they were in the air. Emma, sitting quietly in the corner, didn't react. She only nodded, checked her mission file, and started mentally planning. She didn't need to answer his jokes. She knew exactly what she was going to do once they were in the sky. A few hours later, the pilots walked out toward the runway. The heat shimmered above the tarmac. The sound of jet engines filled the air, deep and powerful. Technicians moved around, checking systems, loading the simulation pods, and clearing the airstrip. Ryan climbed into his F-16, the same confident smile on his face. His helmet went on, his oxygen mask clicked in place, and through the radio his voice came alive. "All right, team, let's make this quick. We'll hunt them down before lunch." From the other side of the runway, Emma's calm voice came over the radio. "Copy that, Captain Mitchell. I'll try to keep up." The tone was light, polite, but there was a hidden confidence in it that made a few of the pilots glance at each other. Then came the signal, "All flights, you are cleared for takeoff." Ryan's jet shot forward first, followed by his team. Moments later, Emma's squad took off, one by one, their engines glowing in the sunlight. Within minutes, both formations were high above the desert, cutting through the clear blue sky like silver arrows. The simulation had begun. Ryan took the lead, checking his radar. "All right, boys, keep tight. Let's flush them out fast." He was aggressive, fast, confident, used to being the hunter. His radar started picking up faint signals. "Got them," he said. "Move in from the east." Down below, Emma had already spotted his formation. But instead of rushing in, She changed altitude, dipping low between two mountain ridges. Her voice remained calm. "Stay low and follow my lead." Her team followed silently. She was playing it differently, patient, smart, waiting for the right moment. Ryan climbed higher, thinking he had the upper hand. His radar showed no sign of Viper 1. "Where is she hiding?" he muttered. Then his radar beeped once, then twice. Before he could react, his warning lights flashed red. Someone had locked onto him. "What the?" he started. But before he could finish, a burst of static came over his comms, followed by Emma's steady voice. "Fox 2, Captain. You're down." The control tower, watching from the ground, confirmed the hit. "Captain Mitchell, simulated missile impact. You're out." There was a pause in the air. For a second, even Ryan didn't say anything. He blinked, looking at his radar, trying to figure out how she'd gotten behind him. He was leading the chase, and somehow she'd turned the tables completely. Back on the ground, the control room was buzzing. The technicians and officers watching the screens could see it clearly. Viper 1 had just outflown one of the base's most skilled pilots. She had used the terrain perfectly, staying low to hide from radar, then rising at the exact right moment to lock on to Ryan's jet. It was a move that required timing, precision, and nerves of steel. Ryan sighed through the comms. "Nice move, Viper 1, he said, half embarrassed, half impressed. Her reply came back, calm as ever. "Good flight, Captain. You'll get me next time." But even he could tell she didn't mean it, because that kind of flying didn't happen by luck. The rest of the simulation went much the same way. Every time Ryan's team tried to corner her, she slipped through like smoke. She used cloud cover, blind spots, and radar tricks that even the base instructors took notes on. By the end of the exercise, Emma's team had scored more simulated kills than any other. When the jets finally landed, the hangar was alive with chatter. Mechanics clapped quietly, and younger pilots whispered to each other about what they had just seen. Ryan climbed out of his jet, helmet under his arm, still shaking his head. He wasn't angry, just surprised. He had underestimated her, plain and simple. Emma landed last, rolling to a smooth stop. When she climbed down, she didn't look around for praise or attention. She just handed her flight log to the crew chief, nodded, and walked away. Her movements were calm, graceful, the same way she'd flown. As Ryan watched her disappear toward the locker rooms, he realized something important. That calmness he had mistaken for weakness wasn't weakness at all. It was control. It was the kind of quiet confidence that came from someone who didn't need to prove anything, someone who already knew what they were capable of. Later that evening, the commander reviewed the results in front of the team. "Excellent flying today, everyone," he said. Then he looked up from his clipboard. "Special note, Viper 1 displayed exceptional maneuvering and tactical discipline." The room went quiet for a moment before a few people started to clap. Ryan joined in, this time smiling for real. He finally understood why that call sign, Viper 1, wasn't just a flashy nickname. It fit her perfectly. Fast, precise, and deadly calm under pressure. He'd laughed at it once, but now he couldn't think of a more fitting name. The next morning, the base felt different. Everyone was still talking about the training simulation from the day before. Word had spread quickly. Viper 1 took down Captain Ryan Mitchell in under 5 minutes. Some laughed in disbelief. Others were impressed. But one thing was clear. Nobody was joking about Emma Reyes anymore. Ryan didn't like losing, but he wasn't angry. Deep down, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, curiosity. How did she do it? How did she move so precisely, so calmly, like she already knew every move he was going to make? He had been flying for years, yet she made him look like a beginner. Later that day, another exercise was scheduled, a follow-up mission designed to test teamwork and strategy. This time, it wasn't about just outmaneuvering each other. It was about coordination, communication, and quick thinking. Ryan and Emma were on different sides again. Everyone was eager to see what would happen next. The sun was blazing as the jets lined up for takeoff. Inside the control tower, the instructors were watching closely, curious to see if the woman they'd heard whispers about really was that good, or if yesterday had been pure luck. Viper 1, you're cleared for takeoff. The radio crackled. Copy, tower. Viper 1 rolling. Her voice came through calm and clear, steady as always. Her jet roared down the runway and lifted into the endless blue sky, followed by the rest of her team. Ryan's group launched seconds later, their engines thundering in pursuit. From the moment they reached altitude, Emma's focus sharpened. Her breathing slowed, her eyes scanning every flicker on the radar. She could already picture where Ryan would move. He was predictable, like most confident pilots. He'd try to corner her, force her to climb high, and then strike when she turned. But Emma wasn't going to play by his rules. The sky was wide and empty except for the streaks of vapor left behind by the jets. The radio buzzed with short commands. Turn left, check radar, target locked. Ryan's voice came through with authority. Team Bravo, tighten up. They're flying low. We'll box them in from above. But down below, Emma was already ahead of him. She noticed a gap in the mountain range. A perfect hiding spot that radar couldn't easily pick up. Team Alpha, drop altitude to 2,000 feet, she said smoothly. Stay close. We'll give them a surprise. Her team followed instantly. Their jets sliced through the hot air, dipping so low that the rocky ridges almost brushed their wingtips. The ground blurred beneath them. From the tower, the observers gasped. She's flying dangerously low, one of them muttered, but her commander just smiled. She knows what she's doing. Meanwhile, Ryan's radar started to flicker. Where are they? He said, tapping the screen. I had them just a second ago. His wingman replied, they must have dropped altitude. Ryan frowned. Fine, we'll draw them out. Keep climbing. Emma smiled under her helmet. She had predicted exactly that. While Ryan climbed higher, thinking he was gaining advantage, she looped around behind the mountains, using the terrain to mask her radar signature. Her training and instincts worked perfectly together. She climbed again, fast and silent, appearing on Ryan's radar just seconds before she locked onto him. His warning lights started flashing red. Beep, beep, beep. Ryan's eyes widened. No way, he muttered. He dove sharply, trying to break the lock, but she stayed with him, tight, steady, unshakable. Her voice came through the radio, calm and almost amused. Fox 2, Captain. You're down again. The control tower erupted in laughter and applause. Confirmed hit. Viper 1 scores another victory. Came the official call over the radio. Ryan leaned back in his seat, letting out a long sigh. He couldn't even be mad. That was beautiful flying. He switched his radio to a private channel and said quietly, You're good, Reyes. Really good. Her reply came after a short pause. Thank you, Captain. You're not bad yourself. Even though it was just a simulation, the message hit him differently. He had underestimated her completely. This wasn't luck. This was skill, the kind of skill that came from someone who had faced real danger before. Back on the ground, the hangar was buzzing again. The younger pilots couldn't stop talking about her. One of them said, Did you see how she used the terrain? That's not something they teach here. Another replied, She's flying like she's been in combat before. Ryan walked in quietly, helmet under his arm. The laughter stopped for a moment. Everyone was waiting for his reaction. He didn't say much, just smiled and said, Looks like Viper 1's teaching us all something new. Across the hangar, Emma was sitting on a crate, writing her flight notes. She looked up briefly when Ryan spoke but didn't say a word. Her calm face gave away nothing, but inside, she felt a small sense of pride. Not because she had beaten him, but because she had earned respect without asking for it. Later that evening, Ryan saw her again in the cafeteria. She was sitting alone reading a mission report. He thought about walking over, saying something funny to break the ice, but stopped himself. This wasn't the same quiet pilot he had laughed at during the first briefing. She had proven herself, not through words or ego, but through precision and composure. From that day on, something changed between them. The jokes stopped. The whispers faded. The other pilots began treating Emma differently, not as the new girl with a cool nickname, but as a true equal, someone whose calm silence hid the instincts of a predator in the sky. Ryan never forgot that flight. It wasn't just a simulation, it was a lesson. A lesson about humility, about judging people too soon, and about the quiet kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And though he'd never admit it out loud, part of him was grateful. Because it took being shot down twice by Viper 1 to remind him that in the air, respect isn't given, it's earned, one maneuver at a time. When the training was over and the jets were parked back in their hangars, the air around the base felt heavy with excitement. Everyone had seen it. Viper 1 had outflown Captain Ryan Mitchell again. What was supposed to be a friendly exercise had turned into the talk of the entire base. Inside the hangar, the loud sounds of engines were replaced with whispers and laughter. Mechanics were still shaking their heads, amazed at what they'd seen. Younger pilots couldn't stop replaying the moment Emma Reyes had pulled off her perfect maneuver, diving low, vanishing from radar, and then appearing behind Ryan like a ghost. Ryan climbed out of his jet, helmet tucked under his arm, the desert sun shining on his face. He took a deep breath and looked across the airfield. Emma was already out of her cockpit, walking toward the hangar with that same calm, quiet expression. There was no pride, no arrogance in her walk, just confidence. For a long moment, Ryan just stood there, watching her. He had been flying for years, but no one had ever flown against him like that. He didn't feel angry, he felt humbled. He had laughed at her call sign once, but now the name Viper 1 sounded exactly right. Inside the hangar, a few pilots came over to him, still chuckling. "Man, she got you again," one said, patting his shoulder. Ryan laughed softly. "Yeah, she did. Guess I had that coming." He didn't bother making excuses. Deep down, he respected her for it. Emma was standing near her jet, writing something on her clipboard when Ryan finally walked over. She looked up as he approached, her face unreadable. "Good flight," he said simply. "Thanks," she replied with a small nod. "You too." There was a small pause. Ryan wanted to say more, maybe apologize for laughing at her call sign during the first briefing, but he wasn't sure how to start. Instead, he smiled and said, "I guess Viper 1 suits you after all." Emma raised an eyebrow slightly. "You guess." Ryan laughed. "Okay, fine. It suits you perfectly." That made her smile. Just a small one, but real. It was the first time he'd seen her smile since she'd arrived at the base. It wasn't a proud smile or a playful one. It was quiet and knowing, the kind that said she didn't need validation. The other pilots nearby were pretending not to watch, but everyone could feel that something had shifted. The teasing and jokes were gone. What was left was respect, pure and earned. Later that afternoon, when the debriefing took place, the commander entered the room with a serious look but couldn't hide his satisfaction. "Excellent work today," he said. "We saw some impressive flying from everyone, but special recognition goes to Captain Reyes. Viper 1, that was textbook precision. Nicely done." A small round of applause broke out. Even Ryan joined in right away, clapping with a smile. Emma nodded politely and said, "Thank you, sir." The commander continued, "I think everyone here learned something important today. Don't underestimate your wingmen or your opponents." He looked around the room with a small grin before walking out. After the meeting, the base slowly quieted down. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert sky orange and gold. Ryan sat on the edge of a maintenance bench, sipping water, still thinking about the flight. He couldn't stop replaying the moment his radar had lit up and he realized she had outsmarted him again. But instead of frustration, he felt admiration. He remembered his early days as a young pilot, how he'd wanted so badly to prove himself, how he'd hated being underestimated. He realized that Emma must have gone through that same thing, maybe even worse, because she wasn't just proving herself as a pilot. She was proving herself in a world that didn't expect someone like her to be that good. When he saw her walking by, he called out, "Hey, Reyes." She turned. "You flying tomorrow?" "Always," she said with a faint grin. He nodded. "Good. I'll be watching your six next time instead of chasing it." Emma gave him a short, respectful nod. "I'll hold you to that, Captain." That small exchange said more than words ever could. It wasn't just about competition anymore. It was about mutual respect. That night, in the officers' lounge, the pilots gathered for dinner and drinks. The mood was light, the music low, and everyone was in good spirits. When Emma walked in, conversations quieted for a second. A few pilots nodded at her, and one even raised his glass. She returned the gesture with a polite smile and walked to the counter to order a drink. Ryan, sitting with a few others, saw her and smiled. He still remembered the look on her face in the sky, calm, focused, fearless. He got up and walked over to her. "You drink?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not before flying days. Just coffee." "Coffee?" he chuckled. "You just beat half the squadron in the air and you celebrate with coffee?" She looked at him with a teasing smirk. "Some of us fly better when we're awake, Captain." He laughed, raising his glass. "Touché, Viper 1. Touché." As the night went on, the mood grew lighter. The same people who had laughed at her call sign 2 days ago were now asking her questions about tactics, training, and her flying style. Emma answered politely, sharing just enough but never bragging. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need attention. Ryan watched all this with a small smile. He finally understood the power of silence, how sometimes the most capable people are the ones who don't have to speak loudly about it. When the night ended, and the bar started to empty, Emma walked past Ryan's table. He raised his glass one last time and said softly, "To Viper 1, the best pilot I've ever flown against." She stopped, looked at him for a moment, and then replied, "It's not about being the best, Captain. It's about flying your best. Every single time." With that, she walked away, leaving Ryan sitting there, smiling to himself. He had learned something that night. Respect wasn't about rank or reputation or words. It was about how you carried yourself when nobody believed in you, and how you stayed humble even when everyone finally did. The night air outside the officers' lounge was calm and cool, with a soft wind carrying the faint hum of jet engines from the far runway. Most of the bass had quieted down, but inside the lounge, low music and laughter still filled the room. The smell of coffee and whiskey mixed together, wrapping the place in a strange comfort that only pilots understood after long, hard days in the sky. Emma sat at the far end of the counter, her posture straight, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee. Her short brown hair was tucked neatly behind her ears, and the soft light above the bar reflected off her flight badge. Viper 1. She looked calm, almost lost in thought, as if her mind was still flying somewhere above the clouds. Ryan sat a few seats away, pretending to talk with his squad mates, but his eyes kept drifting toward her. Something about her presence drew his attention, not just because she was skilled, but because she carried herself with a kind of quiet strength he couldn't explain. She didn't try to prove anything, yet everyone in that room knew she had already proven more than most. After a few minutes, he stood up, grabbed his glass, and walked over to her. She didn't look up until he sat beside her. "You always this quiet after a win?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Emma gave a small smile. "It's not a win. It's training." Ryan chuckled softly. "Most people would call it a win after beating half the squadron." She took a slow sip of her coffee before replying. "Flying isn't about beating anyone. It's about staying sharp. Because up there, one mistake, that's all it takes." Her tone wasn't cold. It was honest, grounded. Ryan could tell she'd seen things he hadn't, things that made her respect the sky in a different way. For a moment, they both sat in silence, watching the rest of the pilots laugh and talk across the room. The laughter felt distant, like it belonged to another world. Then Ryan spoke again, softer this time. "You've been doing this a while, haven't you?" Emma nodded. 8 years. 2 tours overseas. Transferred here last month. Overseas? Ryan leaned forward. "Combat missions?" She nodded again, her eyes lowering slightly. "Yeah. Not all missions end with everyone coming home." There was something heavy in her voice. Not sadness, exactly, but experience. The kind that changes a person. Ryan didn't push for details. He just nodded in understanding. "You know," he said after a pause, "I laughed at your call sign the first time I heard it." Emma turned to look at him, one eyebrow raised. I know. That made him laugh. Yeah, I figured you did. I thought it sounded too dramatic. Viper 1. And now? She asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. Now I think it fits perfectly, he said, raising his glass slightly. For the first time since she'd arrived, she laughed. A small, genuine laugh that softened her whole face. Well, I'll take that as progress. Their conversation grew easier after that. They talked about flying, training, and the crazy things that happened during missions. Ryan found himself really listening. Not just hearing her words, but feeling the weight behind them. She wasn't the kind of pilot who chased glory. She flew because she loved it, and because it meant protecting others. At one point, Ryan asked, "So how'd you get the call sign Viper 1? Anyway?" Emma smiled faintly. "During my first deployment, I was still new youngest in the squadron. We were running an escort mission when our lead got hit. I had to take over mid-flight. There was an enemy jet tailing one of our transports, so I dove in, got behind him, and fired at close range. It was risky, but it worked. The commander said I struck like a viper, fast and clean. The name stuck." Ryan stared at her, impressed. "That's wow. You saved a whole transport like that." She shrugged lightly. "It was teamwork. I just did my part." He shook his head, smiling. "You're something else, Reyes." Emma gave a half-smile and looked away, clearly not comfortable with praise. "I just do my job." But Ryan could tell there was more to her story. Something deeper that made her so disciplined, so focused. She carried herself like someone who had lost and learned from it. A few more pilots came over, joining their conversation for a while. They shared stories, laughed, and even poked fun at each other's flying habits. The once cold atmosphere between them had melted completely. Now, Emma wasn't the new pilot being doubted. She was part of the team. Later that night, as people started leaving, Ryan and Emma stepped outside. The desert air was cooler now, and the stars stretched endlessly over the dark horizon. Jets gleamed faintly under the runway lights, silent but full of power. "Beautiful night," Ryan said. Emma nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars. "I like nights like this. The sky feels honest." He looked at her curiously. "Honest?" She smiled softly. "Up there, there's no rank, no gossip, no pride. Just you, your machine, and the sky. If you make a mistake, it tells you right away. It doesn't lie." Ryan was quiet for a moment. He'd never thought of it that way, but somehow her words made perfect sense. Then she turned to him and said, "You're a good pilot, Ryan, but you rely too much on instinct. Trust your discipline more. It'll take you further." He blinked, surprised. "That's fair advice. I'll remember that." "Good," she said simply, then looked back toward the hangar. "You'll need it. We've got evaluation flights next week." He grinned. "Are you warning me or challenging me?" "Maybe both," she said with a hint of amusement. They both laughed quietly, standing there under the stars, two pilots who had started as rivals but now shared something like friendship, forged not by words, but by respect. When she finally turned to leave, Ryan called out softly, "Hey, Viper 1." She looked back. "I'm glad you're on our side." Her expression softened. "So am I, Captain." As she walked away into the dim light of the base, Ryan stood there for a long time, watching her go. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about winning or proving himself. He was thinking about how some people earn respect not by talking, but by flying, by showing who they really are when the sky tests them. That night, he realized something important. He hadn't just met another pilot. He'd met someone who reminded him what real honor looked like. The next few days on the base passed quickly. The pilots were preparing for a major evaluation flight, a joint training mission that would test not just their flying skills but also how well they could work as a team under pressure. It was supposed to be a simulation, but everyone knew it would feel as real as combat. And this time, Viper 1 and Captain Ryan Mitchell were flying together, as a team. The morning of the flight, the air buzzed with energy. Mechanics moved between jets, fueling them and checking systems. The sun was just rising over the desert, painting the horizon in gold and orange. Emma stood beside her jet, calm and focused as always, checking her helmet and flight gear. Ryan walked up, holding his helmet under one arm, a grin on his face. "Ready to fly, partner?" he said. Emma looked at him, her lips curving slightly. "You sure you can keep up this time?" He laughed. "I'll do my best not to embarrass myself." For a moment, they both shared a quick, easy smile, something that had become more natural between them. But under that lightheartedness, they both knew this mission would test everything they'd learned. Soon, they were in their cockpits, engines roaring, the air trembling from the power of the jets. The radio crackled to life. "Eagle Squadron, this is Control. You're cleared for takeoff. Good luck up there." "Copy that, Control," Ryan responded. One by one, the jets thundered down the runway and lifted into the morning sky. Within minutes, they were high above the desert, blue sky stretching endlessly around them, white clouds drifting far below. The exercise started simple: defensive formations, target tracking, and mock enemy engagements. Ryan led the left wing, Emma the right. Their voices came through the radio, calm, professional, steady. "Viper 1 to Mitchell, adjusting altitude, covering your 6. Copy that, Viper 1. Moving to intercept." They moved like clockwork. Every turn, every dive, every climb was perfectly timed. It was like they could predict each other's moves. For the observers on the ground, it was beautiful teamwork, two pilots flying as one. But halfway through the exercise, something unexpected happened. A sudden radar glitch made one of the jets lose communication. Then, as the team tried to regroup, Ryan's instruments began flashing red. "Control, this is Mitchell. I'm losing engine pressure." Static cut his voice off. Emma's eyes widened as she saw his jet drop slightly. "Mitchell, respond." No answer. His jet started veering off course, smoke trailing faintly from one side. It wasn't part of the drill anymore. Something was really wrong. "Control, this is Viper 1, she said sharply. "Captain Mitchell's bird is losing altitude. Request emergency guidance." "Copy that, Viper 1. He's got a hydraulic failure. Get eyes on him." Emma didn't hesitate. She pushed her throttle forward, her jet roaring as she closed in behind Ryan's. "Ryan, you reading me?" she called again. After a moment of static, his strained voice came through. Yeah, I'm here. Left engine's gone. I'm trying to stabilize." "Stay calm," Emma said quickly. "Level your wings. I'm right behind you." Ryan's jet was shaking violently now. He was fighting the controls, sweat on his forehead. "Can't hold her steady much longer." "You can," Emma said firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Listen to me. Bring your nose up 3 degrees. Reduce speed to 200. That's it. You've got this." Ryan followed her words exactly, trusting her completely. Slowly, the jet steadied, but smoke was still trailing from the damaged engine. "I've got partial control," he said, breathing hard. "Landing's gonna be rough." "Not if I have anything to say about it," she replied. She guided him carefully toward the base, flying so close that their wings almost lined up. From the ground, it looked like a dance of survival. 2 jets gliding side by side, one leading the other home. As they neared the runway, control towers scrambled rescue crews into position. Emma's voice stayed calm and clear, giving Ryan each adjustment, every word timed perfectly. "You're doing fine," she said softly. "You're almost there. Guess I owe you one," he muttered through gritted teeth. She smiled slightly. "You can buy me coffee later. Focus now." Ryan managed a strained laugh before concentrating on the descent. His jet touched the runway hard, skidding for several seconds before slowing to a stop. The landing gear held, and the jet came to rest with smoke still curling from its engine. Ryan sat there, his heart pounding, breathing fast. For a moment, he just stared at the dashboard, realizing what almost happened. Then he heard her voice again, calm and steady. "Good landing, Captain," Emma said. "You're still in one piece." He laughed shakily into the radio. "Thanks to you." When they both climbed out of their jets, the rescue crew ran over, checking Ryan first. Emma landed right behind him and jogged across the tarmac to make sure he was okay. He pulled off his helmet, his hair damp with sweat, and looked at her. "You didn't leave me up there," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You wouldn't have left me." That simple line said everything. They stood there for a moment, the noise of engines and shouting fading in the background. There was a kind of unspoken bond between them now, forged not by competition, but by trust. Later, in the debriefing room, the commander looked at both of them. "That was one hell of a save," he said, nodding toward Emma. "You kept your cool when it mattered." Emma only replied, "Just doing my job, sir." Ryan, sitting beside her, smiled and added, "And doing it better than anyone else." Everyone in the room knew it was true. Even the commander smiled faintly. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan found Emma standing near the runway, watching the sky turn red and purple. He walked up quietly beside her. "Thanks again," he said softly, "for not letting me fall." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the last light of the day. "That's what wingmen are for, Captain." He smiled, but deep down he knew it was more than that. It wasn't just duty. It was loyalty, courage, and respect. For the first time in his career, Ryan understood that flying wasn't just about speed or skill, it was about trust. And he knew he would never forget the pilot who taught him that. Viper 1. The next morning, the base was quieter than usual. The desert sky was pale blue, and a thin layer of mist hung over the runway. The smell of jet fuel mixed with the cool air as the sun slowly climbed higher. The day after the emergency landing, everyone was still talking about what happened. Emma, Viper 1, had not only saved Ryan's jet, but had done it with steady hands and calm nerves. It was the kind of flying that made people legends. Inside the hangar, mechanics worked on Ryan's damaged jet while a few pilots stood nearby, still amazed. Every now and then, someone mentioned her name in disbelief. "She guided him all the way down," one said. "Didn't even panic." Another added, "She's the best pilot on this base, no question." Ryan walked in quietly, his uniform neat but his face thoughtful. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the voice that guided him down. Calm, firm, unshaken. He had flown with many skilled pilots before, but no one had ever shown that kind of composure. He saw Emma standing near her jet, helmet under her arm, talking to a mechanic. She looked completely collected, as if yesterday's life-or-death flight hadn't even happened. When she saw Ryan approaching, she gave a small nod. "Morning, Captain," she said. "Morning," he replied, a faint smile on his face. "You really don't waste time, do you? Already back at it?" "Can't stay grounded too long," she said lightly. "The sky doesn't wait." He chuckled. "You sound like someone who was born up there." Emma glanced at him, her eyes thoughtful. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Or maybe I just lost too much down here." Ryan noticed the change in her tone. There was something behind her words, something he hadn't asked about before. He hesitated, then said softly, "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" She looked at him but didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "Go ahead. Why do you fly?" he asked. "I mean really fly. You could have chosen anything. But you push harder than anyone I've seen. What drives you?" For a long moment she didn't speak. She just stared out toward the runway, where the sunlight shimmered on the metal wings of the jets. Then she said quietly, "My brother." Ryan tilted his head. "Your brother?" Emma nodded slowly. "He was a pilot too. Air Force. Call sign Viper." Her voice softened as she said the name. "He was my hero growing up. The reason I joined." Ryan listened in silence, the noise of the hangar fading behind them. "He was deployed overseas," she continued. "On a rescue mission, his squad got ambushed. He didn't make it back." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened slightly in the light. "The day I graduated flight school, I took his old helmet and painted Viper 1 on it. I wanted to carry his name, not to replace him, but to honor him." Ryan felt a deep ache in his chest. "Emma, I didn't know." She gave a small smile, though her eyes were distant. "Not many do. It's not something I talk about. People think the call sign sounds aggressive, maybe even arrogant. But for me, it's a reminder. Every time I take off, I remember why I started. There was silence for a while. The only sound was the faint echo of a wrench clinking against metal somewhere in the hangar. Ryan finally said softly, "He'd be proud of you." She looked at him then, truly looked at him and nodded once. "I hope so." Ryan shifted slightly, looking down at his hands. "You know," he said after a pause, "the first time I heard your call sign I laughed. I thought it was over the top. Now I understand it means more than most names ever could." Emma smiled gently. "People always laugh until they learn the story. It doesn't bother me anymore. I don't fly to impress anyone." Ryan nodded. "No, you fly to keep a promise." She blinked slowly, surprised by his words, and said softly, "Yeah, exactly." For a few minutes, they both just stood there in silence, the morning light growing brighter around them. Ryan finally said, "You saved my life up there, Emma. I'll never forget that. But I think you saved something else too." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He smiled faintly. "My pride. I used to think being the best meant flying faster, fighting harder. But you showed me it's about staying calm when everything's falling apart. That's real strength." Emma gave a quiet laugh. "Then maybe you did learn something after all." He laughed too. "Maybe I did." Later that day, there was a small ceremony in the operations hall. The commander stood before the pilots, commending the entire team for their performance. But he saved special words for Viper 1. "Yesterday's emergency reminded us what true professionalism looks like," the commander said, looking directly at her. Captain Reyes kept her composure, guided her teammate home safely, and prevented what could have been a tragedy. That's leadership. That's what this uniform stands for. Everyone in the room clapped. Ryan stood in the front row, clapping louder than anyone else. When she turned slightly, their eyes met. A look of mutual respect that needed no words. After the ceremony, they met again outside, near the airstrip. The sun was setting now, the sky glowing orange and red. The jets lined up like silhouettes against the horizon. Ryan said quietly, "So what now, Viper 1? You gonna keep teaching people lessons up there?" She smiled, the wind brushing against her hair. "Someone has to keep you in line, Captain." He laughed softly. "Fair enough. But next time, maybe I'll be the one watching your six." She raised an eyebrow playfully. "We'll see about that." As they both looked toward the fading sky, Ryan realized how much had changed in such a short time. The pilot he once laughed at had become someone he deeply respected. Someone who reminded him that courage isn't loud, and strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just flies, quiet, steady, unstoppable. That night, as he sat outside his quarters, Ryan looked up at the stars and thought about her words. About flying, about loss, about purpose. Somewhere out there, maybe her brother's spirit was still watching the skies. And now she was carrying his legacy forward, one flight at a time. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Viper 1, the sky's lucky to have you." And for the first time, Ryan didn't see her as just another pilot. He saw her for who she truly was, a soldier, a sister, and a symbol of what it really means to never give up, no matter how high the sky or how heavy the heart.